Why are they going around investigating matters right now? Somebody accuses a Jehovah's Witness of taking advantage of them, and they assigned 2 elders to go around investigating? Are you kidding me? Why didn't they call the police? Why are they not sending the police in? This is Stephen Lett. He's a governing body member of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization are deeply destructive to the people that they lead, especially Stephen Lett and Tony Morris, 2 of 8 governing body members. If you're unfamiliar with Jehovah's Witnesses and what they believe and what they do and what they push their people into doing, one of the things that I have the biggest problem with is how they treat outsiders to the religion, or people who have decided that they don't believe it anymore. If you decide you don't believe in any of the stuff that they say anymore, you don't have the option to leave. It's not on the table. You are forced to remain a member and hide your true feelings about all of this stuff, or lose your friends and family forever. That is the consequence of separating yourself from this religion. And they've set that up very intentionally. Now, the guy that I have on screen here, Stephen Lett, is powerful enough inside the organization that he has the option to change that policy today, now. He could walk out and say, Jehovah God told me we shouldn't be shunning people who leave the religion anymore. But what does he do? Instead of doing something that uplifts and helps and builds the members of this religion, he comes out here and demonizes ex-members of the group even more. Full disclosure, I, of course, am an ex-member of the group. Since I've left, for the most part, I've been talking about why it's such a destructive group in the first place. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Watch this video from Stephen Lett. It should give you an idea of how they view outsiders and people who are critical of the religion. This is from September 5th, 2022. It's a JW Broadcasting episode.
Satan continues his work as an evil ventriloquist using not serpents, but human puppets to enunciate his voice, these acting as his agents, either wittingly or unwittingly.
I guess that'd be this guy right here, who has 2 thumbs and is an agent of Satan. This guy.
But now let's discuss 3 examples of how our fine shepherd tells us one thing, but Satan's underlings or strangers tell us something opposite.
Okay, so they're about to try to defend their religion here.
We know the Master Jesus found the faithful and discreet slave spiritually feeding right-hearted ones in 1919.
Now, this is a complicated part of their theology that I don't need to get into too deeply, but they basically made an end of the world prediction in 1914, actually 1913 originally, and even before that. They claimed the end of days would come in 1913. Of course, nothing happened, so they had to change it. They said, oh, we meant 1914. Nothing happened. So instead of continuing to move the date back further and further, they claimed that something did actually happen. Secretly, Jesus came back in 1914, invisibly. You just didn't see it. Lo and behold, 1919 rolls around. They made another end of the world prediction. Nothing happened. 1922, 1925. I mean, they just kept on coming. To explain all those failed predictions away, they kept using them as like the premise for this weird thing that happened. 1914, Jesus comes back invisibly. And then 1919, when that prediction failed, they claimed Jesus decided that year that Jehovah's Witnesses were the real religion that were taking care of things and doing the stuff that God wanted them to do on earth. So he named Jehovah's Witnesses as his secret special organization in 1919. That's the claim. That's why that year is significant to them, if you will. Oh, and they call themselves the faithful and discreet slave. The governing body does, like the leadership. They call themselves a faithful and discreet slave, which is a Bible term. Basically refers to like anointed special leadership on earth or whatever. They claim that they receive prophecy from God regularly and stuff.
1919. And at a future time will appoint him over all his belongings. So what's the implication? Obviously, even now, Jesus fully trusts the faithful slave. And all of us, even individual members of the governing body, should do the same.
They are the faithful and discreet slave. Are they saying they need to trust their own decisions because they made those decisions?
But what does the voice of strangers say on this subject? Don't trust the faithful slave.
He's talking about apostates. This is what apostates say, supposedly. This is what I say in his mind.
Don't trust the faithful slave. He will mislead you.
Well, they most definitely have. Just one or two examples right off the top of my head. For a long time, they claimed that Jehovah did not want Jehovah's Witnesses to get organ transplants because organs carried part of the personality of the person that originally owned that organ. So if you get a kidney transplant from a murderer, then it will turn you into a murderer. They reversed that, I don't know, a decade later or something. Weird thing to reverse. Seems pretty important and on the line. And didn't they claim this came as prophecy straight from Jehovah himself? They reversed it like a decade later. And then they flipped again for a second time. They said it was allowed, and then it wasn't allowed. It was allowed, it wasn't allowed. And they kept flip-flop like that. Which is it? You claimed every single time it was a message from Jehovah. No joke. These people are ridiculous. It gets even more ridiculous. We aren't even halfway through this video. Just wait.
And who often have the loudest voice promoting this false message? Apostates. Hebrews 13:9 labeled,
Oh boy, do they hate apostates.
false messages as strange teachings. Yes, they are the teachings of strangers. Some examples of their strange teachings are that the faithful slave protects.
Okay, let's just stop there and address that one, because that's a pretty on-the-nose claim. Why do people say that? It's a valid question, right? Why do apostates claim that? We're going to use the term CSA. Why do critics of the religion claim that they defend CSA? Here you go. This is a Wikipedia page titled Jehovah's Witnesses Handling of CSA. In June 2012, Superior Court of Alameda, California, ordered the Watchtower Society to pay $21 million in punitive damages. In 2007, during a trial motion in Napa, California, court against the Watchtower Society, victims' lawyers convinced the court that ecclesiastical privilege does not supersede the legal obligation of clergy to report CSA to secular authorities. The Watchtower Society paid an undisclosed amount without admitting wrongdoing in an out-of-court settlement with 16 unnamed victims of alleged CSA. According to court documents obtained by NBC News, one plaintiff was awarded $780,000. Oh my God, dude. A newspaper reported in 2008 that subpoenaed elders declined to testify against accused penitents, citing the confidentiality of penitent clergy privilege. Weird. Anyway, there are actually a billion examples of this. So how does this keep happening? Why do they keep getting sued, and how do they keep winning? I mean, not Jehovah's Witnesses. How do the plaintiffs keep winning suits against Jehovah's Witnesses? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about why Jehovah's Witnesses are not just negligent, but culpable in CSA. What I have here is the Elder's Handbook from 1991. This is not supposed to be available to anybody except elders, and they treat this with kid gloves. They're very careful about who is given access to these books. Luckily, there are apostates in the ranks of elders. Elders, if you're unfamiliar in Jehovah's Witnesses, they're basically like line managers. They're at the top of the congregation. There may be 6, 7, 8 elders in the entire congregation of, say, 100, 150, 200 people. And they run everything about the congregation. There's a presiding overseer that handles everything. There's a service overseer that deals with people going out and door knocking. You know, there are elders that handle everything. Now, if a Jehovah's Witness gets in trouble with something, there are 3 elders that get together to handle the situation. It's called a judicial committee. And they gather together and they talk it through. They work through the story that this person tells. Say they cheated on their spouse. They talk to the person, they ask questions, they get details, and I mean details, to figure out if they're repentant or If they went far enough that it warrants being disfellowshipped from the organization, which means no more talking to friends and family for the rest of your life, that's generally what a judicial committee does, right? Well, this book, Pay Attention to Yourselves and to All the Flock, this is the Elder's Handbook. Again, it's a guarded, secret book, usually. This is the 1991 version. So why is it that Jehovah's Witnesses keep getting sued over CSA? Why don't we take a look at the CSA section of this book, shall we? Jehovah's Witnesses are setting up their own corporation, or not even their own corporation, their own government. They are attempting to set up their own government. They have punitive measures to punish people for things that they do. They have a welfare system where they will give you money if you need it, or they'll give you supplies. When I was little, we moved from Connecticut to West Virginia, and the entire congregation pitched in, gave us thousands of dollars, gave me school supplies because we had nothing. We moved, and we were broke. My parents didn't have jobs. They didn't have anything at all. So they have a welfare type of system. They have a system for punitive justice, the disfellowshipping system. They operate just like a government does because they do expect the government to fall one day. And when that day comes, they want to be able to step in and act as a de facto government for Jehovah's Witnesses. So this book should explain everything related to any issues that would come up in a society. Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to treat the elder body as the government, as more important than the U.S. government. They're expected to believe them and trust them and respect them more than the U.S. government. So they should have a section in here on CSA and what to do when something like this comes up, right? The government they have set up dictates that you're only allowed to punish somebody for something if there are 2 witnesses to the event. If somebody comes in and takes advantage of somebody else, that's only 1 witness. The victim is a single witness. Either another victim or another person who literally saw with their own eyes what was happening needs to come forward, or the elders just forget it happened. They just pass it off and ignore it as though nothing happened at all. One of the biggest problems in the Jehovah's Witness organization back in the late 80s, early 90s was people were committing CSA and then moving from congregation to congregation. They'd do it once. They had no proof. There weren't 2 witnesses, so they couldn't do anything with that information. The person would leave, go to another congregation with a clean slate, do it again to somebody else. Again, no evidence. They weren't connecting dots because nobody was communicating because there weren't 2 witnesses. And then they'd move to another congregation. This happened some crazy number, like 26 times or something like that. And there was a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit over that specific event I'm referring to right now. What led to this problem? It was explicitly Jehovah's Witnesses' instructions for how their elders are expected to act in these situations. There is almost nothing about how to handle these situations, even in the 1991 version of the book. So that brings us to the 2010 version of the Elder's Handbook, because 1991 had almost nothing about it. If wrongdoing, again, this is from 2010. This is the Elder's Handbook, how they're supposed to handle CSA. If wrongdoing has not been established but serious questions have been raised, the body of elders should appoint 2 elders to investigate the matter promptly. For example, there may be just 1 witness. Remember what I said about the 2-witness rule earlier? There may be just 1 witness. If so, it would be loving for the witness first to confront the accused and encourage him to take the initiative to approach the elders. The elders can then allow the accused a few days to approach them. For the witness by himself to confront the accused may not be advisable in all cases. For example, if the witness and the accused were involved in immorality together, or if the witness was a victim of, or by the accused, or is a child and the victim of CSA. Or it may be that the witness is extremely timid. Whether the witness approaches the accused or not, the 2 elders appointed should speak with the accused regarding the accusation. If the accused denies the accusation, 1 witness, not 2, just 1, and it's being denied by the accused, the investigating elders should try to arrange a meeting with him and the accuser together. If it involves CSA and the victim's currently a minor, the elder should contact the branch office before arranging a meeting with the child and the alleged abuser. If the accuser or the accused is unwilling to meet with the elders, or if the accused continues to deny the accusation of a single witness and the wrongdoing is not established, the elders will leave matters in Jehovah's hands. You catch what that just said? This is the 2010, this is their correction book, okay? Back in the 80s and the 90s, there was a serious oversight. There's almost nothing about how to handle cases of CSA, and as a result, they defaulted to the two-witness rule, which meant people were just going from congregation to congregation, abusing, just taking advantage of people and moving to the next one. And if there's one thing you know about Jehovah's Witness culture, especially as an elder, it's that you don't involve the outside authorities. You don't call the police. You are supposed to be the government. Why are they going around investigating matters right now? Somebody accuses a Jehovah's Witness of taking advantage of them, and they assigned two elders to go around investigating? Are you kidding me? Why didn't they call the police? Why are they not sending the police in? Instead of calling the police, they have these two who have their own jobs and their own lives and have too much shit on their plate already. They're sending them around stalking people, digging into their lives, and forcing this child to sit in a room with the perpetrator and explain to the elders what happened exactly in vivid detail. Trust me, it was too much detail. There are court records of this stuff, and it's happened way too many times to count at this point. My first question is, why aren't they calling the police? The answer is because they want to set up their own government. They don't want to involve the police in anything. Again, 2010, okay? This is not that long ago when this book came out, and it was intended to remedy a hole in the government that they had set up, that they were trying to fix. This is their solution. If the minor cannot handle sitting in a room and addressing the accuser, 6-year-old kid can't handle sitting in a room with somebody who did something absolutely terrible to them, elders are expected to leave it in Jehovah's hands. They forget all about it. Not call the police, not tell the parents what's going on, not reprove the person and tell the congregation that there's somebody in the congregation that's taking advantage of people possibly. Not any of that stuff. Don't punish the person in any way. Do nothing to protect people. Just leave it in Jehovah's hands. So that was the 2010 version. I have the 2021 and 2022 addendum to this book. It gets better. And by the by, that's pretty much the only section on this. There are a couple of other weird, little mentions or whatever, but that's about as far as it goes for the 2010 version of this. Like, the next section that mentions this basically just tells what you're supposed to do when you have established without a shadow of a doubt that there most definitely was CSA taking place. So, 1991, basically nothing in the book about it. Almost nothing. 2010, they instruct people to leave it alone unless there are two witnesses. Don't tell people to call the police or any of that stuff. Here's the 2021 handbook for elders. This is why they have so many lawsuits, by the way. This is why they are nearly being sued out of existence right now. This is why the Jehovah's Witness organization had to implement what they call the master plan, which includes selling off old congregation buildings that are no longer in use and combining congregations together so that they're all using the same kingdom hall, selling off their headquarters in Brooklyn, New York, like New York City, their prime real estate that they've had since like the 1920s or 30s, selling it off and having new headquarters built in Warwick, New York. I think they sold that property for like $1.3 billion or something like that. And why? So they can pay for all these lawsuits that they've been dealing with for decades. So this is the 2021 version, remember. This 2021 version of the Elder's Handbook. This is an updated version intended to address some of the problems that they had in their congregation. So here's another section on CSA. From the Bible's standpoint, CSA is a gross sin. Jehovah's Witnesses abhor CSA. Thus, the congregation will not shield any perpetrator of such repugnant acts from the consequences of his sin. Notice the word sin there. Not crime, sin. They view it as a moral failing not a legal failing. Why are they handling this at all? Why are they dealing with this in any way? Call the police. Notice mention of police was nowhere to be found in the 1991 edition or the 2010 edition. Let's see if it pops up in the 2021 edition. And honestly, them condemning child abuse, I never doubted it. I'm sure they don't like it. I'm sure they have a problem with people who do this. Absolutely. It's how they go about establishing that it took place and protecting the congregation and the child. That's what I have a problem with. They're using the two-witness rule, which came from the Bible originally, and it was intended to act as a protection against, like, people lying about a contract that they signed. If there weren't two witnesses there to witness the signing of a contract, I'm going to sell you this donkey, or I'm going to buy this piece of gold from you or something. If there wasn't a second witness there to witness the financial transaction taking place, then it's like it didn't happen at all. That's what the two-witness rule was. And Jehovah's Witnesses are taking the two-witness rule and applying it to legal matters. Instead of calling the cops, they're applying it to legal matters. Okay, let's keep reading. So, yeah, I know they have it's repugnant, blah, blah, blah. I get it. I know they view it that way. That's not the issue. We all knew they didn't like it. The congregation's handling of an accusation of CSA is not intended to replace the secular authorities' handling of the matter. Wow, interesting. So this organization has existed since 1874. That's when it was the Bible students. It became Jehovah's Witnesses in 1933. We are 90 years in to the organization establishing itself as a pseudo-government over its people. 90 years! And now they're putting in the congregation's handling of an accusation of CSA is not intended to replace secular authorities' handling of the matter. 2021! Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Jehovah's Witnesses. Therefore, the victim, her parents, or anyone else who reports such an allegation to the elders should be clearly informed that they have the right to report the matter to the secular authorities. Elders do not criticize anyone who chooses to make such a report. Wow. So, all right, let's see, 1874, how long is that? Okay, so roughly 146 years after this organization was founded. It took them 146 years to instruct the elders to make sure people know it's okay for you to call the cops. That's okay. It's fine. We're not going to reprimand you if you call the police. It took them 146 years. And they're not even telling the elders to call the cops. Okay, if you're an elder and you find out about CSA taking place, call the cops! Are you kidding me? Call the cops! Do not tell the people they have the choice of calling the police. They're not going to be treated badly. Nobody will judge them for it. Jehovah may or may not. No! Call the cops! You've got to be kidding me with this. Really? They're just now putting in their book, it's okay to call the police. In 2021, they say it's okay to do that. Just a little update for you. Jehovah's Witnesses tried to defend themselves by claiming clergy privilege, but this wasn't told to them by a perpetrator in a confession. In the scenario being described in the Elder's Handbook, this stuff is being reported to them by a victim, so they can do something about it. Clergy have a moral obligation to involve secular authorities if they catch wind of a crime being committed against people in their congregation. Up until 2021, Jehovah's Witnesses were explicitly discouraged from involving police in anything at all, not just this specific type of thing. They weren't supposed to bring police in no matter what. It was obviously such a problem that they had to explicitly tell elders that it was okay to bring police in if something like this happened. Instead of telling the elders it was okay to bring police in, the book should have said, if you don't bring police in when you find out about this, you will be disfellowshipped. We're reading from a 2021 book right now. A lot more stuff has happened since then. For example, a new law passed in a U.S. state that requires all religious clergy to take a training course on mandatory reporting and stuff like that. And what was the Jehovah's Witness organization's response to all that? to claim that elders aren't clergy at all. They aren't religious leaders, they're just volunteers. I swear, this religion will do whatever it takes to protect predators in their ranks. Why are they fighting this so hard? I really don't understand. It continues, the scriptures place the responsibility on parents for teaching and protecting their children. As spiritual shepherds, elders can help parents to shoulder their scriptural responsibility. Our publications and website contain much helpful information to assist parents. In other words, it's not the elder's problem or responsibility. It's the parents' fault. This religion controls every aspect of people's lives, down to how they interact with the outside world. But if somebody gets hurt in the congregation as a direct result of the policies they implement, they're going to blame everybody else. They want all the control and none of the blame when things go wrong. They have set themselves up as a pseudo-government. They aren't legally allowed to jail people. Like, they don't have that ability. So instead of physically putting somebody in prison, they imprison people's minds. They threaten them if they step out of line or do something they're not allowed to do or do something they don't like. They will take their friends and family away permanently. They will never speak to them until the day they die, which is exactly what happened to me and my family. I lost them permanently. I haven't spoken to my mom in 12 years. Haven't had a relationship with her in 12 years, at least. Now, lucky for me, the rest of my family left the religion behind too, most of them. So I do have a relationship with most of them again. But I will never speak to my mom again until the day she dies because of this religion. They attempted to set up a pseudo-government, and instead of protecting children explicitly in this government, they have chosen to deal with lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. And when they're sued for their mishandling of CSA cases, they claim it's Satan. They claim it's demons. It's apostates' fault. Apostates are stepping in and causing problems for Jehovah's Witnesses. Innocent little Jehovah's Witnesses. This is the guy that wrote the policy, by the way, about how it's okay to call the police if you want. You can tell parents they're okay to do that if they feel like it. You know, whatever. It's not a big deal. Somebody just got... And if you choose to, you can call the cops. We won't judge you for that. Not call the cops. Not I'm going to call the cops if I hear about it, which is what it should be. But it's okay if you call the cops. He's the one that wrote it. He and the other 7 people on the governing body handled what we just read in 2021. So let's listen again to what he had to say about apostates maligning them.
Some examples of their strange teachings are that the faithful slave protects.
They most definitely do. Now, is that intentional? I don't think so. I think it's a byproduct of their absolutely absurd, ridiculous, stupid policies. Why don't you just put in a policy to protect children above all else? Tell elders to call the secular authorities. I don't understand. Why? Why die on this hill? You don't have to. You can make things better for everybody around you. But okay.
Those are both bald-faced lies.
Not really. I just went through exactly what my problem is. Do I think that they are in favor of people who commit CSA? No, not at all. Absolutely not. But they, for some reason, cannot get it through their thick skulls that people should be instructed to call the police. They have a pseudo-government set up. They have complete control over their people. Complete control. And instead of telling them to call the police when they find out about this, they put 2 elders on the investigation team. Give me a break. I mean, this is by no stretch of the imagination the worst problem the biggest problem I have with Jehovah's Witnesses. There's a lot that I have to say about this organization. I mean, I was never personally the victim of CSA, but I was the victim of domestic abuse when I was a little kid. My dad was very physically abusive, and the elders knew about it. They were aware. In fact, there's a Jehovah's Witness who left my congregation when we got older, just a few years ago, was talking to me. And he was telling me, my dad used to call in. My dad claimed to be disabled. It was a big thing. He has Munchausen syndrome, blah, blah, blah. That's irrelevant. He used to call in on the phone system. He used to, like, call into the meetings, like the church services, listen to what, the services from the phone. One time, this guy that left the religion that was in my congregation when we were both kids, he contacted me a few years ago. We chatted it up, talked about it. He told me a story of one time when he was sitting at the meeting. My dad had called in. We were all at home listening. And there was something messed up where the phone wasn't muted and it was feeding back into the speakers of the congregation. 150 people listened as my dad, abused me, specifically, me, over the phone system. The elders knew what was going on in my life. They knew exactly what my dad was doing. And what did they do about it? Nothing. They did nothing. That's not strictly accurate, I suppose. My mom left my dad over and over and over again. And you know what they said when she left? You need to go back to him. You're not scripturally freed. The only scriptural justification for divorce is if the partner cheats on you. You need to go back to him. And she did. She took me back to my dad over and over and over again, probably 6, 7, 8 times when I was little, from the age of 10 to 16. When I was a kid, it was hard to avoid the bruises. Like, everybody in school could very clearly see the bruises. CPS got involved so many times that it came to the point that they told my mom, you are not allowed to bring me, Owen, back to that house again. If my mom brought me back to that house with my dad, they were going to take me away and put me in foster care. That was a little too late because that wasn't until I was 17 years old, but whatever. If you don't take my anecdote for it, listen to what Stephen Lett has to say about those types of situations. This is from September 5th, 2022.
For example, in a movie, a female character might be portrayed as having a husband who is abusive. You like the woman, and you want her to find happiness. A handsome man starts working in her office, and he's so nice to her. There's an attraction between them, and the budding romance is presented as something good. Soft background music makes it hard to consider her course to be bad. It's easy to keep watching and hope she leaves her marriage mate and runs off with her workmate. And usually that's what happens. So easily we can forget that Jehovah and Jesus hate adultery and unscriptural divorce.
So Jehovah's Witnesses, clear as day, again, governing body member, as high up as you get in this organization, dude has the power to come out and tell the other 7, I heard a message from Jehovah myself. He said, blah, 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 we should be doing this. Governing body member Stephen Lett says, I don't give a shit if you're being abused by your husband or wife or child or whatever. I don't care who's being abused by who. Doesn't matter. You're expected to stay with your partner or parent or whoever else no matter what. I don't care. It doesn't matter at all. Nothing matters. What matters is you staying in that relationship, period. What is wrong with them? Is there anything knocking around between those ears? Anything? They do nothing but damage to society and have since the beginning. Since 1874, when Charles Taze Russell, the founder, made his first end of days prediction. They've been doing nothing but damage. Let me know what you think about all this. Let me know if you think the lawsuits are justified. If you think people are justified in suing this company out of existence. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Defeater of Huns. What happens if governing body members claim to have conflicting messages from Jehovah? Like one says, you can talk to disfellowship people, and the other says, make sure to have no contact with disfellowship people. It doesn't really work like that. It's like the governing body members have throughout time established these positions and beliefs, like about organ transplants, about taking a blood transfusion, about talking to disfellowshipped or disassociated people or whatever else. The previous governing body members throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I think the organizational structure changed from a president to a governing body in the 60s or 70s. I don't remember. Anyways, the governing body members throughout that time made those claims. Now, historically, governing body members have contradicted what previous ones have said, and they have changed policy. Like the organ transplant thing. They used to accept organ transplants, and then they didn't, and then they did, and then they didn't, and then they did. I think right now they do. When they change like that, they call it receiving new light. They're getting new information from Jehovah. The old information wasn't wrong. The new information is just clarifying the picture. Even if it completely, directly contradicts what the old information said. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, that's how they, deal with conflicts or contradictions. It almost never happens. It's unheard of from my position for two governing body members to simultaneously have contradictory prophecies from God. Usually if one says something and claims it came from Jehovah, the rest accept that. Where would my grandmother have gotten the idea that JWs don't believe in the Trinity? They don't. They don't believe in the Trinity. That's correct. And Jehovah's Witnesses are correct on that point. The Trinity is not in the Bible, actually. It was retroactively added to the Bible after the fact. And they use that fact that they were correct on the Trinity issue. They use that fact to bolster their credibility in other areas. Interesting take on the organ transplant thing. Why couldn't a witness believe in God and body turn the murder organ toward God? Weird. Pat in the chat. Appreciate the super chat. Yeah, interesting question. Why couldn't the good Christian Jehovah's Witness just change the quality of the organ? I don't know what you would even call it. Why can't they change the personality of the organ to like a Jehovah's Witness one? You got me. It didn't make sense to start with. Don't try to make sense of it now.